Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, specifically the DM bullet point problem historian. Okay? Now, I apologize. If you don't know what the Dungeon Master bullet point problem is, you got a little bit of homework before you can watch this. In the doobly doo below, you'll find the link to the foundational video that explains the Dungeon Master bullet point problem. Without that, this video won't have context. I apologize. I hate giving people homework for these videos, but I hate even worse repeating myself in every video because that's not fun for everybody. So let me go forward. All right, so let's talk about the Dungeon Master bullet point problem historian. So one of the disciplines that's nested under Dungeon Master is historian. Why does a Dungeon Master have to be a historian? Well, one, there are at least two regions history baked directly into Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. The first is medieval feudalism. European feudalism is baked into Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. It's right there, right? It's essentially saying you're not going to find a laser gun here, okay? What you are going to find is stables and taverns and inns. You're going to find kings and queens. You're going to find dukes and duchesses. You're going to find nobility. You're going to find bards. And all of these match very closely, if not lock, like right into medieval feudalism. If you don't understand medieval feudalism, you are not going to be a good dungeon master. So you have some work to do to become a historian of medieval feudalism, okay? And that is to paint this picture, okay, for your Dungeons and Dragons game, so that your Dungeons and Dragons game seems consistent and logical to people. In addition to that, the samurai exists within Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, so also you need to understand Japanese feudalism, right? So essentially, Japanese samurai class daimyo, what's a wakizashi and a katana, and the warrior, bushido. All of this is right there in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, right? And so you need to understand Japanese feudalism. You need to understand medieval feudalism. And what happens if you don't, right? Well, I'm sorry to say you are highly likely as a dungeon master with your 4 to 6 players sitting at the table to have one knucklehead who is going to be like, wait, that didn't happen in medieval feudalism, right? And you're going to have one person there who's like, I don't know if the damage ratio for this longbow is really correct. Could we please use a different die for it? Literally, entire tabletop role playing games have been rewritten because people are like, oh, the medieval longbow is not represented here well from a damage perspective, and you will get some wonks, some history wonks up in your game. And so you need to know history, okay? It doesn't stop there. Once you have a good understanding of medieval history, of Japanese history, right? Then in addition to that, to make a great Dungeon Master game, you need to pull in additional really dope, really expressive, exciting aspects of other nations' history. So you will find things in Canadian history, in French history, in Russian history, in African history, right? Stories and actually, not when I say story, this is the story being captured, not a fiction story, but a real story of things that actually happened within these nations. The real history of these nations contain leaders, they contain martyrs, they contain inventors, they contain artists, they contain all these incredibly epic stories which good dungeon masters constantly are pulling from, right? And history is a powerful, powerful source of making Dungeons and Dragons better, because you can pick the most dramatic points in Russian history, the most dramatic points in French history, right? And for most of your players, it'll go right over their head, and they'll think you created this dramatic, tense, awesome, Jenga pile of drama, right? And one person will get, oh, this is just France 1740, right? But they won't be like, ooh, you just, cribbed French history 1740. They'll be like, oh, I see you, right? So you are called to master history, right? And you can't have a dismissive amount of knowledge, right? I've read easily 10 books on samurais alone, right? And on medieval feudalism, I know what a parapet is, right? Like normal people don't know what a parapet is, right? Like normal people can't say, oh, well, this is what a portcullis is, and they can't tell you, well, this is the basic structure of castles, and this is why they have walls, and there's an inner area, and it's just it's a significant thing. It's a discipline that you're called to master, and it is no small thing. It's really major, right? So, and what happens if you get it wrong? Oh boy, right? So one, at the low end, people are like, I'm not really comfortable with that. Like, I don't think you're doing a great job of making this have a medieval feudalism feel, right? And if you have a player at the table who's like, I wasn't expecting laser guns, I wasn't expecting things that don't fit medieval feudalism at the macro level. Okay, you can fill 49% of your game with things that aren't medieval feudalism, but generally 51% should fit, right? Like, and you definitely should not have stuff that you would be ignorant. Like, the reason you can't put a laser gun in Dungeons and Dragons is, what the heck are wizards there for, right? Like, it doesn't work. Like, firearms in Dungeons and Dragons really doesn't work, right? So basically, at the one end, you'll frustrate players. Here's the other one. Also, not only do you need to know the history, you have to carefully respect it. So if you use history and then you make one group in your Dungeons and Dragons game, and you say and you don't carefully cover, right, and disconnect the people in your Dungeons and Dragons game from what's happening in history, you have the possibility of offending a player, and not in a small way, in a way that is so profound you could lose a friend, right? Or you could alienate somebody that was just an associate. So there are very real risks to getting the history part wrong, and it's one of the reasons why you need to master it, okay? So history is a huge part of Dungeons and Dragons, and it is absolutely essential to master history in order to be a dungeon master. You can start dungeon mastering before you've mastered it, but you can't start dungeon mastering if you really don't know anything about medieval feudalism and Japanese feudalism, and are able to go and get other elements of history from other nations, and then execute it perfectly so no one is offended. It's a lot. It is a lot. The idea that that we should just be like, oh, would you like to dungeon master? Step carefully. This is just bullet point 1. Virtually nothing else in life is saying, nothing else in life calls people to master 10 plus disciplines. And this is just one. All that's my opinion. Do you agree that understanding medieval feudalism, understanding Japanese feudalism, understanding how to crib carefully, respectfully material from all kinds of different nations is part of being a dungeon master? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.